Well, good morning, everyone. I want to thank you for coming out. Thank you, Pastor Josh, for that nice announcement and letting everybody know that I like hazelnut coffee. How many here really enjoy Pastor Josh and thank him for being our pastor? He really works hard, and it's an honor of mine to be able to give him the opportunity to take a week off with his family. And some of you may be thinking, who is this guy and why is he up here? So last week, Jessica and I got the honor and privilege to go with Josh and Nicole to the district council and got a little more understanding of different pastors and how everything works. And he explained to me the difference between a credentialed pastor, a licensed pastor, and an ordained minister, and none of which I really knew about. And you're in for a treat because I'm none of them. So I have no idea what I'm doing, and I've never done this before, so bear with me. I am definitely not the Bible scholar that our pastor is, but I'm going to give it a shot. So this morning, I was thinking about what I should talk about and what we should share. And really what I wanted to do was share something that's been important and kind of a driving factor in my life and share it with you. And hopefully maybe it comes across with the same importance and the same passion that I've had. When I was about, say, 19 years old or maybe 18 years old, something had changed in my life that I think changed me forever and kind of guided the direction of my life. And I wish I could say I've been on that same trajectory the entire time, but unfortunately not. But something happened to me that cannot be totally explained. And I'm going to kind of go through a portion of the Bible that really spoke to me at that time. And hopefully you get it as well. So I hope all of you brought your Bibles this morning because we're going to do quite a bit of reading. So I think it's important to get the entire story of who we're talking about this morning. And once you have that whole story, you can kind of see how it all unfolds and maybe a little glimpse of what it means in your life. So this morning we're going to talk about Josiah. Not the gentleman on the front row, but the gentleman in 2 Kings. So we're going to start in 2 Kings 22. So we're going to review the life of Josiah, and then I might actually offer a little bit about my own personal life, which I don't do very much. So hopefully we're in for something. So like I said, when I was about 19 years old, I had recently given my life to the Lord, and I had no idea what I was doing. So I just moved to Madison, Wisconsin. I was going to college. I was going to college all morning and working all night, and started having children at the same time. So I had really was in over my head, and I wasn't sure what to do and how to keep going and how to find the strength and the courage and how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to be a father? I'd not even done growing up. All of that kind of stuff. And I had, and I couldn't even find a church in Madison. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's a very liberal town. I've tried a lot of different churches and went to different couple places, and nothing felt right and nothing felt at home. But the one thing I took comfort in was I would work at this hot little plastic factory all night long. And then in my lunch break, I'd go in and I'd listen to these preaching tapes that I had. And one of them had the story of Josiah in it. And I listened to it over and over and over again. And what it did was build a hope in me that made me know that everything was going to be all right. So today we're going to kind of go over that same story. And hopefully you can maybe glean a little of that as well in your own life if you're going through some of those hard times as well. So I'm going to read through this, and I'm bound to mess up every biblical Old Testament name that's in here. So, try not to laugh too loud. So starting Josiah chapter 22, or 2 Kings chapter 22. Josiah was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 31 years. His mother's name was Jetta, daughter of Adiah, and she was from Bozkath. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord and walked in all his ways of his father David, not turning aside to the right or to the left. So first we're going to stop right there and say Josiah was 8 years old when he became king. So that right there tells you how many of you would trust your 8-year-old, if you've ever had an 8-year-old or been 8 years old, to run anything. So I have a 9-year-old, and I don't even want her to be home alone by herself. So here was a king who, at the age of 8 years old, was surrounded by people who were trying to influence him, people that were trying to pull him in this direction or that direction, and try to influence the direction that the kingdom of Judah was going to go at that time. So Josiah, at the age of 8, was thrown into a very political realm in a nation that had turned away from God. So as we continue on, in the 18th year of his reign, King Josiah sent the secretary Shaphan, son of Azaliah and son of Meshullam, to the temple of the Lord. He said, "Go up to Hilkiah, the high priest, and have him get ready the monies that had been brought into the temple of the Lord, which the doorkeepers have collected from the people. Have them entrusted to the men appointed to supervise the work of the temple, and have the men pay the workers who repair the temple of the Lord, the carpenters, the builders, and the masons. Also, have them purchase timber and dress stone to repair the temple. But they need not account for the money entrusted to them, because they are acting faithfully." So at this time, all the people the remnant of God's people that were left in Judah that had not turned to the false idols were still giving gifts to the temple. And you could also go back to read in 2 Chronicles, where it also gives a little more insight on Josiah's life. And it said, even though this is the 18th year of Josiah, which puts him at about 26 years old, because that's the 18th year of his reign. If you look at the other chapters, at about 16, he decided that he was going to follow God, even though his father and grandfather were very responsible from turning the entire nation from God. But it wasn't until his 18th year of reign that he said, "Why don't we go and fix up the temple a little bit?" So I'm sure if you have a whole nation that's turned from God, the temple has been in disrepair. If you read before chapter 22, where you read about his father and his grandfather, they had set up shrines in the temples to other gods, and it's kind of a vile and ugly and nasty place. So he said, "Well, why don't we take some of this money and maybe fix it up a little bit and see what happens?" So Hilkiah the high priest said to Shaphan the secretary, "I have found the book of the law in the temple of the Lord." He gave it to Shaphan, who went to the king and reported to him, "Your officials have paid out the money that was in the temple of the Lord and have entrusted it to the workers and supervisors in the temple." Then Shaphan the secretary informed the king, "Hilkiah the priest has given me a book." And Shaphan read from it in the presence of the king. So after they were doing these repairs, they found this old text. They brought it to the king, and the king said, "Well, why don't you read to me from it? I'm now also following the Lord, and maybe I can gain something from my ancestors." So he started to read from the book. And it says, "When the king heard the words of the book of the law, he tore his robes. He gave these orders to Hilkiah the priest, Aklam, son of Shaphan, Akbor, son of Micah, Shaphan the secretary of Isaiah, the king's attendant. Go inquire of the Lord for me, for the people, and for all Judah about what is written in the book that has been found. Great is the Lord's anger that burns against us because our fathers have not obeyed the words of this book. They have not acted in accordance with all that is written there concerning us." Hilkiah the priest, Akam, Akbor, Shaphan, and Isaiah went to speak to the prophetess Huldah, who was the wife of Shalom, son of Tikva, the son of Haras, keeper of the wardrobe. She lived in Jerusalem in the 2nd district. She said to them, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Tell the man who sent you to me, this is what the Lord says. I am going to bring disaster on this place and its people, according to everything written in the book the king of Judah has read. Because they have forsaken me and burned incense to other gods, provoked me to anger by all the idols their hands have made, my anger will burn against this place and will not be quenched. Tell the king of Judah who sent you to inquire of the Lord, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says concerning the words you heard. Because your heart was responsive and you humbled yourself before the Lord, when you heard what I have spoken against this place and its people, that they would become accursed and laid to waste, and because you tore your robes and wept in my presence, I have heard you, declared the Lord. Therefore I will gather your fathers, I will gather you to your fathers, and you will be buried in peace. Your eyes will not see all the disaster I am bringing on this place." So they took this answer back to the king. So we're about halfway done reading. From all of that, Josiah started to hear what was read in that book, and it affected him so much that he, if you're the king, you are the strength of the country, and he tore his robes and he broke down in front of, I'm sure, many people, and it affected him so much that it changed who he was and everything that he had thought up into that point. And it didn't end there. So Josiah said, the Lord had said, I am going to turn my anger from you, even though I'm still not very pleased with Judah. Because you softened your heart to me, I'm going to allow you to die in peace. However, Josiah did not stop there. He felt this need and this burning because of these words that he heard, that he had to do something for his people, for his country, and he couldn't believe how much his forefathers, his own father, his own grandfather had turned away from God. So we're going to read this next section, which is pretty unbelievable. So here's a man that's 26 years old who went out to change his nation, to change the world in which he lived. Then the king called together all the elders of Judah and Jerusalem. He went to the temple of the Lord with the men of Judah, the people of Jerusalem, the priests and the prophets, all the people, from the least to the greatest. He read their hearing all the words of the book of the covenant, which had been found in the temple of the Lord. The king stood by the pillar and renewed the covenant in the presence of the Lord to follow the Lord and keep his commands, regulations, and decrees with all his heart and all his soul, thus confirming the words of the covenant written in the book. Then all the people pledged themselves to the covenant. The king ordered Hilkiah the high priest, the priest next in rank, and the doorkeepers to remove from the temple of the Lord all the articles made for Baal, Ashereth, and all the other starry host. He burned them outside Jerusalem in the fields of Kidron Valley, and took the ashes to Bethel. He did away with a pagan priest appointed by the kings of Judah to burn incense on the high place of the towns of Judah and on those around Jerusalem. Those who burned incense to Baal, to the sun and moon, to the constellations, and to all the starry host. He took the Ashereth pole from the temple of the Lord to the Kidron Valley outside Jerusalem and burned it there. He ground it to powder and scattered the dust over the graves of the common people. He also tore down the quarters of the male shrine prostitutes who were in the temple of the Lord, and whom did weaving for Ashereth, and the women who did weaving for Ashereth. Josiah brought all the priests from the towns of Judah and desecrated the high places from Geba to Beersheba, where the priest had burned incense. He broke the shrines at the gates at the entrance to the gates of Joshua, the city governor, which is on the left of the city gate. Although the priests of the high places did not serve at the altar of the Lord in Jerusalem, they ate unleavened bread with their fellow priest. He desecrated Topheth, which was in the valley of Ben Hinnom. so no one could use it to sacrifice his son or daughter in it to the fires of Moloch. He removed from the entrance to the temple of the Lord the horses that the king of Judah had dedicated to the sun. They were in the court near the room of an official named Nathan Melech. Josiah burned the chariots dedicated to the sun. He pulled down the altars the kings of Judah had erected on the roof near the upper room of Az, and the altars Manasseh had built in the two courts of the temple of the Lord. He removed from there and smashed them to pieces and threw the rubble into the Kidron Valley. The king also desecrated the high places that were east of Jerusalem on the south of the hill of corruption, the one Solomon, king of Israel, had built to Ashereth, the vile goddess of the Sidonians, for Chemosh, who the vile god of Moab, and Molech, the detestable god of the people of Man. Josiah smashed the sacred stones and cut down the Ashereth pole and covered the sites with human bones. Even the altar at Bethel, the high place made by Jeroboam, son of Nebat, who had caused Israel to sin, even that altar and the high place he demolished. He burned the high place and ground it to powder, and burned the Ashereth pole also. Then Josiah looked around, and when he saw the tombs that were there on the hillside, he had the bones removed on them and burned on the altar to defile it, in accordance with the word of the Lord proclaimed by the man of God who foretold these things. The king asked, "What is this tombstone I see?" The men of the city said, "It marks the tomb of the man of God who came from Judah and pronounced against the altar of Bethel the very things you have done to it." "Leave it alone," he said. "Don't let anyone disturb his bones." So they spared his bones and those of the prophet who all had come from Samaria. Just as he had done at Bethel, Josiah removed the defiled all the shrines of the high places and the kings of Israel, and built in the town of Samaria that had provoked the Lord to anger. Josiah slaughtered all the priests of the high place on the altars and burned human bones on them when he went back to Jerusalem. The king gave the order to the people, "Celebrate the Passover to your Lord your God, as it is written in the book of the covenant. Not since the days of Judges who led Israel, nor throughout the days of the kings of Israel and the king of Judah, had any such Passover been observed. But in the 18th year of King Josiah, the Passover was celebrated to the Lord of Jerusalem." So I apologize for all the reading, but I felt that it was important to see that something had changed in Josiah that caused him to sweep through an entire nation. And if you think about it, for generations before Josiah, those were the gods that were worshipped. Those were the people, the culture, the history of all those people. And Josiah put an end to it immediately. He swept through the land and he broke it down. He burnt it up. He scattered all the ashes on the graves. I imagine what the Kidron Valley must have looked like, full of broken down shrines and garbage from all out the land. And so I'm sure at the time, had made a few enemies, being that the priests that they trusted in, he had killed and burnt on the altars. So that's pretty serious stuff. But Josiah, all of this, in an instant, changed his entire life. Something happened to him that made him go and just do unbelievable things in the name of God. So he went and changed his entire world. So his entire world at the time, he was king. His entire world was all of Judah. And he says, "I may not have control over the world, but I have control over Judah. And because I heard these things, this is what I'm going to do." So what is it that changed Josiah in such a dramatic way that he could do this? And the answer is in 1 Kings chapter 13. So we're not going to read quite as much. So 1 Kings chapter 13, verse 2. He cried out against the altar by the word of the Lord. "O altar, altar, this is what the Lord says. A son named Josiah will be born to the house of David. On you he will sacrifice the priest of the high places and now make offerings here, and human bones will be burned on you." That is what Josiah heard that made him change his life. So he asked for the book of law be read to him that he found in the temple that had been forgotten about years and years ago. I'm sure full of cobwebs and dirt. And he brushed it off and he cleaned up the temple of God. And he said, read to me from the book. And when that words were read, in that instant, Josiah realized he had a destiny. He had a hope. There was something more than just being an 8-year-old king. There was something more than what they were doing. There was something more than the shrines that they built. He had a purpose. He had something in his life that changed. He knew that he was more than just a man that was sent here to have attendance and have a nice court and do the things that most kings did at the time. He had something else that he was required to do, that he knew he had to do. And you could tell that even though his father and his grandfather were the reasons that Judah had just turned from God, even before this happened, when he was 16, he felt God's calling in his life. But he didn't know what it was. He didn't do all those great things. He decided, we're going to clean the temple up and we're going to, we will be one of the other gods amongst Judah. But it wasn't until he heard those words. And back then it was a little bit different. It wasn't the personal relationship that we have now with God. There was no, Jesus had not come. So it was by prophets and people like that you heard the words of God. And so here's a man who's just thinking, I am going to do what's right. I'm going to clean up the temple. And then he heard that he himself, called out by name, had a destiny, had a hope. He was the hope of his people. He was the last man standing in the gap between Israel or Judah and God. When you have a hope, it changes who you are. When you have a purpose and a desire and a longing for something more than who you are and what you are, when you have something outside of your selfish wants, great things can happen. Josiah realized that great things were within him, were within his grasp. Josiah was a man of God that he had a future. So Josiah humbled himself before the Lord and aligned his desires, his dreams, his wants. And because of that, God honored him by giving him the gift of hope. After he had that hope, he just didn't end there. So Josiah said, I have this hope. Doesn't mean I'm in the clear. I can go back to being a king. I can, I can order, some more feasts to be happening. I can add some more attendance to my court. Josiah said, now that I have the desire, it's going to burn in my life until I do something about it. That he couldn't stop. So Josiah said, I have to try to turn this thing around. It's fell upon me that there is nobody left in the land. There's scattered believers throughout the land. There was still the high priest, but nobody had even taken care of the temple. So Josiah knew that this had fallen on him. He was the hope. And so he scattered throughout all of Judah and even beyond that and decided he was going to be the man who purged the evilness out of that land. And he not only saved himself, but he saved an entire generation from the fate that God had already had on them. So God stopped the destruction until Josiah had passed. Josiah was a king, but not of the entire world. Josiah changed according to his circle of influence. So when you have a hope, it doesn't mean that you may not change the world, but every one of us has a circle of influence. Every one of us has somebody that looks to you, somebody that is next to you, somebody that's influenced you. In the same way, Josiah said, I may not be able to change Egypt. I may not be able to change some of these other places. The Assyrians and the Egyptians that were all surrounding him, that were all these great nations. I may not be able to change them, but I can change what I have influence over. And because I have a hope, I'm going to share that hope with everybody that I have influence. And so it reminds me of the state in which we are today. So at the time, Judah had just completely turned away from God. And the God's wrath was about to befall them. There was nothing they could do about it. God said, because of what you did, and it's not because you did something one time, because of the generations that you have turned away from me, I am going to allow your enemies to come and just destroy you. So it reminds me of the world we live in today. We have turned away from God so far that the Bible is already, it's all written there. It says that there is no hope for this world. Eventually, God will come and have His wrath will befall upon us. But God at the same time said, I have sent you a hope. There is something that the world may not have hope, but the people do. And God said that because I love my people, the world is no more. It has no hope, but I have sent Jesus as your redeeming hope for each one of your lives. And I have predestined every single one of you with a purpose, a part of the plan. So we have a world that's searching for an answer. There's so many people, if you talk to anybody, everybody wants to talk about the politics, the economy, all of the things that are going on in the world that make you... I don't know how many of people have watched the news any time in the last 50 years, but there's not a whole lot of good news out there. You watch the news and you walk away thinking, what's the point? That there's nothing left. The people are turning against each other. People are turning in masses away from God. And we've, I know on Thursday nights when we have our Bible study, they kind of gone over throughout the world, that's starting in this country now, but especially throughout Europe, all of the big cathedrals and the churches and everything are now becoming bookstores and nightclubs and all kinds of weird things. The people have turned from God. But God has a purpose, and He has a hope for His people. And each person that's here today is that people. God, even at the time in Judah when everybody had turned from God, there was still a remnant. There was still the people that were there that said, we will follow God. And Josiah decided to tap into that and say, this world has no hope in the path that we're on, and it's time to change. So that's what we're all faced with each and every single day. That yes, there may not be a hope for this world. That there may not be something that we could go in and change everybody throughout the world, but we are responsible for the people in that world. We are responsible for sharing that hope. And in 1 Peter 3:15, it always says, be prepared to have an answer for the hope that you have. So what does that mean? So why would it even say that? I don't know if you've ever talked to anybody in the workplace and everybody wants to talk about their 401k plan, their what's happening in their neighborhood, or I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills, they're not giving us raises this year, this on and on and on. And it's really easy, very easy to get hopeless. But God says, my people will provide hope. That be prepared for that answer is eventually people are going to wonder why, well, what's different about you? I don't hear you complain about those things. God's people have a hope that's beyond what this world has to offer. And once people start realizing that you are the person that always seems to be upbeat, always seems to have the answer and have it together, and even though worlds may be falling apart around you, you still have stayed strong. And why is that? And that's where God says, be prepared to share that answer. Because I do not hope in a politician, or I don't hope in the strength of the stock market, because I know that God has made a promise. And in fact, God has made many promises throughout the entire Bible that is still true today. And that is what hope is based upon. So the world sees hope as something different than what we see it as. The world, that hope is something that is a dream, that is hopefully one day I'll get a raise, or hopefully I will get that job, or I hope good things happen. And most of the time when people say it, they don't even really mean it. I mean, they don't really expect it. They don't believe it. But what God has given us is the hope, a biblical hope. And He says, here's why you have hope. not because you hope something will happen, but because throughout my word, I have made promise over promise over promise for my people. And I have never changed, nor will I ever change, and nor will my word ever be false. So the hope that comes from God is a different kind of hope that is based upon His word, is based upon something that cannot be changed by the events that happen in this world. God has called His people to that hope, and He's asked us to share that hope with the world. You are the light of the world. And it's when I said we were at the district council, there was a gentleman that spoke there that I think really impacted everybody in the room. And he had a different, I would say, approach that most people normally have to speaking to the world. And it just reminded me of this so much that he said so many Christians feel that they have a job to do, that they have to go out and they have to drag this person into church and they have to do this and we're going to get them saved and we're going to do all of this. Not necessarily anything wrong with it, but he said he felt something in him that he had to spread something new. And even though he was a senior pastor at a church, I think it had thousands of people, he decided to get a volunteer job and reconnect with the real world. And he didn't go out to say, I'm a pastor and you need to come to my church and now I just found a way, an outlet to meet people. He decided, I am going to be friends with the people that I'm longing for. And he went out and he started talking to the people and befriending them and not even telling them he's a pastor. He just started imparting the hope that's in his life into these people. And people around him started to change and they knew there was something different about him. And over time, as these people had problems and as life kind of overtook them, the only thing that they knew, the only face of God that they knew was somebody who extended a hand to them, somebody that was a friend to them. And they started coming to Him and say, what should I do? That is what God has called us to do. He's called us to share the hope that He has provided to us with the entire world. And as we go and throughout our day and to our workplace or to school and all the other places that life brings us, we are the reflection of God. And we are the only experience that most people will have these days with a God that loves them. And so when they see you, they should see that reflection, that hope that's beaming out of your life. And it doesn't mean that everything's perfect, because if any of us know, being a Christian is not easy. It's very hard. And just because we're a Christian and because we have the hope that the Bible gives us, doesn't mean that problems go away. But what it does mean is that problems will not overtake us. And when people of the world start to begin to see that, he has the same problems as me, but he goes home and his family enjoys having him home, and he doesn't leave or he's not fighting with his wife and his kids, and he's not going out and he's not complaining about his wife the way that I complain about mine, or I know he makes as much money as I do, but he never seems to be complaining about money issues or all the things that this world brings. He seems to be different. And that is the hope that we're trying to share with the world that's around us. I've had some of these experiences in my own life, and I am by no means a Josiah, and by no means have changed the world around me like Josiah. But I understand what that feels like. I spent many years of my life in a hopeless state, I would say, starting at a very young age. And so this is the part, I guess, where maybe I'll tell you something about myself. So at the age of 8, Josiah became king, and at the age of 8, I went to this school, this very school. And at the age of 8, I was in the 3rd grade. And in the 3rd grade, that was, I think, I started here in the 2nd grade, which was the 3rd school I had gone to and since the 2nd grade. And so I was pretty fresh here. I started the 3rd grade, thought I was going to do great things. And it didn't turn out so great for me. I had a teacher that didn't think that I was smart enough to be in the class. So I was tested for learning disabilities, and I was shoved to the back of the class, and it really broke the spirit of a child that when you're struggling, and not even the teacher believes in you. I mean, that's, the one job that they have is they're paid to teach kids. They're paid to teach their children. And even the teacher thought I was in over my head. And I'm, 8 years old. So they had me tested, and I know my parents objected to it, but finally they said, go ahead. And turns out I should not have been in the 3rd grade. I should have been in the 4th grade. But the teacher had a different opinion. But that started a cycle, I think, in my life of hopelessness that never seemed to go away. Each year I would get further and further behind, and it was harder and harder to make friends and to fit into the world. And I've always been a little bit larger than the other kids, which meant I didn't get beat up, but also had its own set of problems and anxieties and all that kind of stuff. And so at some point in life, I just kind of gave up. School is, maybe it's not for everybody. And I spent the next years of my life doing just enough to make it to the next grade, or just enough to please what I needed to do, but I never expected much out of my life. And by the time I got to high school, I think Brian Jackson was here a couple weeks ago, who told you what high school was like. I had all but given up. I knew I didn't even have confidence that I was going to finish high school. I didn't have confidence in myself that I would even make it. And so I would stop going to class, and I'd hang out with Brian Jackson outside of school and do those types of things. But it wasn't until I was about 17 years old that God kept pounding at my life and kept interjecting and saying, just like in Josiah's life, saying, there's more to it. You have a purpose and you have a hope. And I couldn't get rid of it. And even though that I tried to do everything that I could to deaden that voice in my head and run away from everything that I knew was right, God would find me everywhere that I went. And when I was 17 years old, I decided to go back to church. And at that moment, just like when Josiah heard his name being read, hope was restored in my life. And at that moment, I think I was a junior, I think maybe a senior in high school. Not enough credits to graduate, but I had hope restored. And at that moment, I went from maybe a D average or a C average to I finished my last semester of high school, made the honor roll, and I graduated. And I never thought that was going to happen, but I didn't think it was going to go much further than that. So I had spent years, thinking about college or a life or a family or any of that kind of stuff. That had not crossed my mind. So now, okay, that was a minor accomplishment, but now what? What can I do now? I've spent years kind of rejecting everything. I guess I'll get a job. And so I got a job at a small factory, and I thought that this was life. Even, I've kind of done this to myself. And even though I had hope in God, I didn't really have hope in myself. But I knew God had something else for me. And he kept interjecting and changing things. And I would be at work next to the guy, on a welding machine, and they would ask me, what's different? We're all working here at the same place, and it's not a very nice place to work. But they knew something was different, and they kept asking me, and I said, I don't know, I just have this hope now. I know everything's going to be all right. I don't know how, but it's going to work out. And God kept bringing things in my life to the point where I ended up moving to Madison, where we started this story. And I went to college. And I didn't only go to college, again, just because I made it hard for myself doesn't make everything easy. So in order for me to go to college, obviously, I worked full time. I went to college, and I did all that. But God kept blessing me with more and more hope and building on that little bit of faith that I had that everything was going to be all right. And he kept working and working and working, and to the point where I was able to go to college. I was able to have a family. I had children, and none of that was easy. But God was able to turn my life around and restore hope. And even though that I may have been 8 years old and kind of robbed of something, God can restore anything in anybody's life. So that may not be as powerful as going through and maybe killing a few priests or anything like that. But I felt a relation to the story. I felt that even though I may just be a guy outside of this factory listening to something in my car, having to go back in and catch plastic pieces out of a machine in a few minutes, I knew that God had something more in my life. Just like Josiah had heard his names in that book, I felt God was calling my name as well. And he's not finished. So I'm not standing before you to say, I own a chain of chicken restaurants or something, and look how great I am, and I'm a millionaire. But I can tell you that I walk through the world with hope. And still to this day, I know people come to me and say, you never get mad. You're never upset. All these things that are going on at work, and there's always rumors that we're going to get closed down and all that kind of stuff. And why not? And it's because that God put something in my life, and it's such a burden that is just released when God has that hope in your life. So it brings a whole new meaning when you read of what is the Bible talking about when it says, take my yoke and it's light and I'm taking the burden from you. This is what it means. That when you grab a hold of the hope that God has in your life, all of that heavy burdens of this world is gone. So I no longer have to worry about how bad the world is or what my future holds, because all I know is that God asked me to do this, and if I'm faithful to that, He will be faithful to me. And it's a light load to carry. It's not easy, but it's a light load to carry. And everybody can have this hope, and it's what the world is searching for and cannot find, and it's what the world is begging you to tell them. But are we? And it's the thing that I struggle with myself. I'm not a great person to always be the first one to speak up about my faith. I'll definitely admit that. But it is an approach that people want to hear it. I know I've had the opportunity, and it's an amazing experience when people start to understand that there's something different about you, and they're interested and they're curious, and they say, "Well, why don't you care?" It's because I have the hope of God in my life. So I hope maybe that a little bit of that comes across. When you grab a hold of that, the impartation of God's plan in your life is that thing that just can't be ignored when everything seems impossible. So there's impossible things in life, and there will be impossible things forever. But when you grab a hold of what God has for you, the impossible is no longer scary. And natural hope is the kind of hope that the world experiences. It's rooted in a feeling. It's backed by a worldly reasoning. I can have hope as long as I can mentally picture it. Or there's a lot of different new age things of just think positive and good things will happen. All of that just to convince yourself that there's hope in this world. But the Bible's already told us that there is no hope for this world. The hope is in Him. And the biblical hope is the desire for the future good that can't be explained. It's only God's Spirit that is guiding you. This hope is rooted in the promises of God and not in the promises of this world. So I hope today that you're able to understand and grab onto that hope and have that desire to want God a part of your future, a part of your life, and to guide your steps. So I don't know what else, much more to say beyond that, besides that God has a plan for each and every one of you. And it doesn't seem logical. It doesn't seem like it has some sound reasoning. Who am I? But God has a purpose for your circle of influence. And that each and every one of us, God predestined for a purpose. So just like Josiah was not born until hundreds of years after those words were written, God knew that one day there will be a man that will grab onto my hope and change this nation. And in the same way, you were born, and God said when that person is born, he will grab a hold of my hope and change his world. And that world may not be the entire world. It may not be the United States. It may not be Wisconsin or Kenosha, but it may be your circle of influence. I know that as far as I can reach, I have a family and I have children and I have people that I come across each and every day that I have an influence over. Maybe not the deciding factor, but God put me in their lives for a purpose, and he has a purpose for my life, the same as he has for yours. So I hope that today that you grab onto that hope and you decided to take the bold moves that even Josiah made. I mean, God is not asking you to tear down any shrines, not that I know of, but he's asking you to make those same types of decisions in your own life, to go out and make the bold statement that Josiah made in your circle of influence. So hopefully today you can grab onto that. And I just want to make a call to each one of your lives. That today is the day that you hear your name, that God is calling your name. That you could read the Bible and may not hear Brad Henry, but you know that is God reaching out, calling you for the purpose that's in your life. So I hope that today you can gain a little of that, understand a little of that reasoning. And I apologize if it wasn't quite as dynamic as Pastor Josh. But I thank you for listening anyway. One of the things that I'm going to put back on the back table when I leave here is I printed up a few copies of all the promises of God. Not all of them, but there's too many to list. But some of the important ones that say if you're having a bad day, remember these. Or if you're making a tough decision, remember these. And it's the promises of God that he made in his word to hopefully inspire a little hope in your life. So if you feel free to take one if you want, and if we run out, just let me know and I'll bring some next week. But I want you to be able to leave here equipped with something to face the day tomorrow, and to be able to spread the hope that God has imparted in your life into someone else's. And when that happens, it starts spreading throughout the world. So thank you very much. I think that's about it.